Good morning. Finance Committee meeting is called to order on Tuesday, April 25th at 9:35. At this time, I'll accept, now all members are present, that being Alderwoman Finlayson to my right and Alderwoman O'Neill to my left, Alderwoman Pendle Charles as a attending. At this time, I'll accept a motion to revise the agenda.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda with the additions of SA 27 and SA 28.
Do I have a second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, agenda approved. At this time, we are going to go into general discussion. We have the Public Works Department presenting the first hour, followed by the Enterprise Fund rate increase budget. Katie, are you able, or Director Dickinson, are you both able to confirm that Stantec will be here for that portion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. You're welcome to the table, Director Jarrell and your team. And what we've done this year is allocate a full hour, including questions. We'll save the questions to the end unless there's some clarification needed beforehand. And I understand you have a presentation.
I do have a presentation. So good morning, David Gerald, Director of Public Works.
We don't have it.
And with me is Danny Harwith in case there's questions about the fleet budget. He's much more versed on that than I am. So we'll jump in since we have a lot of ground to cover in an hour's time.
Excuse me, time out. Is there a question?
We don't have the presentation. Could you send it? Oh, Madeline has it. Okay. Do we need to wait a minute until she?
If you want to, you can, but it'll take me like 2 seconds. You want to wait so that you can see.
We can follow along until then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So while we're waiting on that, I wanted to cover a couple of things before I jump into this org chart anyway. So I always like to talk about what the American Public Works, how they define public works, because people don't really necessarily know what public works is and what all we do. So I've always liked this definition from the American Public Works Association. So public works is the combination of physical assets, management practices, policies, and personnel necessary to provide and sustain structures and services essential to the welfare and acceptable quality of life for its citizens. And I think that pretty well captures what public works is. And you know, it's really what separates first world from third world countries. If you think about water systems, wastewater systems, roads, streets, that really what separate, and that's really what public works takes care of. I also wanted to mention, and it's not on any of the slides, what our mission statement is while we're waiting for you to get the presentation. So our mission statement is to create a safe, clean, and inviting urban living and working environment within the city by planning and providing system services and skilled employees necessary to sustain city infrastructure. So with that, I'll jump into the org chart. I think you all are aware of our organization. We're organized into 7 separate groups. Administration is me, and I'll mention that Marcia Patrick would be sitting right here if she were in town. She's out in Seattle nursing her daughter who blew out her ACL and had knee surgery in a skiing accident or incident. So she's out in Seattle. Otherwise, she would be here. And she did a lot of the work to put together this presentation, so I appreciate her. So anyway, we have administration, which is Marcia and I and our support, administrative folks. And then we have 6 operational divisions: public works services, utilities, engineering, construction, fleet, water treatment plant, and solid waste. So this just gives more information on the number of people in each of those groups, what some of the job classifications are, and some of the things that they do. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these next couple of slides. Just kind of a high-level overview of Public Works. We have a total of 111 full-time equivalents. 58 of those are in general fund, 53 in the enterprise fund divisions. We have the largest budget in the city by quite a bit, 34 million. I think police and fire are both about 25 million. But most of that's because we have the enterprise fund budgets of 24 million and 9 million, almost 10 million of general fund budget. So we have lots of highlights, and I'm certainly not going to read through all of these, but I'll hit some of the highlights. So we've added a lot of additional training for our folks, and that includes things like defensive driving, but also some specific training for performing their functions. We've really ramped up the social media campaign we have for recycling and solid waste to try and get people to put the proper things in their recycling. Because we end up with a lot of contamination in our recycling, which means it ends up in the trash. So we're really trying to emphasize education there. Of course, Hillman Garage, over the last year, the development agreement was completed, as well as the financing, and the construction is ongoing, and it's going to wrap up in June. We're also working on the design and permitting of the big city dock project that's coming up. Start construction next year. Let's see. Public Works Maintenance Facility, we continued working on that over the last year, and that is opening next month in May. There's a lot of, in case you hadn't noticed, there's a lot of construction going on downtown. So we've been actively coordinating that with the state. To try to cause the least amount of disruption to downtown traffic. Recently, Blaine Street closed because the state's redoing the steam tunnels that run beneath Bladen, so that's caused further impact to traffic. That's going to be a project that's going to keep Bladen closed until the end of the calendar year. We submitted the MS4 report to Maryland Department of the Environment. Every other year, we have to submit a full-blown detailed report, and then on the off years, it's what's called the short report. So this year was the full report, and we're doing well in the stormwater area. So that's a good news story. Purchase vehicles. We purchased our first 2 electric. So we've been actively coordinating that with the state to try to cause the least amount of disruption to downtown traffic. Recently, Blaine Street closed because the state's redoing the steam tunnels that run beneath Bladen, so that's caused further impact to traffic. That's going to be a project that's going to keep Bladen closed until the end of the calendar year. We submitted the MS4 report to Maryland Department of the Environment. Every other year, we have to submit a full-blown detailed report, and then on the off years, it's what's called the short report. So this year was the full report, and we're doing well in the stormwater area. So that's a good news story. Purchase vehicles. We purchased our first 2 electric vehicles, 2 Chevy Bolts. We were just talking about those a minute ago. We're kind of rotating those around to different departments to see where they're going to fit best and see how well they work for the departments that have those for future purposes. When we buy additional ones, we want to make sure that they work for the department that we're getting them for. We also got some hybrid police cruisers, and those are our first hybrid police cruisers. The Church Circle traffic signal replacement project, the design was completed, and we began construction, and that's one of the projects that's downtown and causing disruptions. So it's going very well, and Burr Vogel, who's here with us, is managing that project. It's going well. And finally, on this page, we created a stormwater group within engineering. We now have a stormwater program manager and an additional environmental compliance inspector. Let's see, completed the traffic calming on Melvin. We resurfaced a little over 2 miles. I'd like to get eventually to 3 miles each year because that would better allow us to meet our goal of doing resurfacing every 20 years, which is sort of the ideal. But right now we just got 2 done. The reason why that's a lesser number is because the sub-base on those roads was in worse condition, so we had to do a lot more than just mill and pave. We had to actually address the base and the sub-base. We did repairs at Gott's parking garage. The handrails, the long overdue handrails were done. We lined 1,000 lineal feet of sewer mains, televised 2,300, installed new mains up and around School Street and Church Circle, again adding to the disruption up there. And Truxton Heights Storm Management Program, which is going to be a very large project in the future. We're continuing with design on that. And utilities, the highlights here, again, we had a number of water main breaks that were addressed. We had some right over Christmas. That was a cold snap, so typically when you get a cold snap, you get a lot of water main breaks, and we did this year. 234 meters were replaced, which is a good thing. Failed meters read too low, not too high. So that allows us to more accurately charge our customers for the water that they use. We did about 2 miles worth of red curb painting last year and 1,000 potholes. So I'm going to jump forward to talk about our goals. So sort of our high-level goals are these 5 items: prevent excellent drinking water and sewer collection services. So we want people, when they turn on their water and flush the toilets, to not have to think about whether it's going to work or not. It works every single time is our goal. Maintain high-quality street system that supports vehicles, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Again, reliable collection of trash, so when people set their trash out, it gets collected and they take their cans back without any hassles. Reliably maintain our city vehicles and buildings. Those are our internal customers that we support, and we want to provide good service to them. And then professional project management for capital projects. So I'll drill down on these a little bit. Maintain clean, serviceable streets. So our objectives are pothole-free streets and clean streets through street sweeping. So our benchmark is 2,500 potholes repaired. If we do less, that generally means the streets are in better condition, but that's generally about the number that we do. This year, because we didn't have the severe freeze and thaw cycles, we have had to do less, and that was only 1,000 instead of the 2,500 we usually do. And we did 5,666 miles of street sweeping. Functional city buildings. So the objective is to ensure the upkeep and maintenance of city buildings. So the benchmark is 750. We completed 685 work orders on buildings. I heard the discussion at yesterday's meeting about the air conditioning at the police station. I'm happy to address that during the question time. High quality, safe drinking water. And what goes into that is that we have to maintain the water distribution system properly in order for that to happen. So our goal, our benchmark is 5,000 feet of water mains, check for leaks, and we actually did 117,000 feet, so we greatly exceeded that number. 300 water valves exercised. We were a bit under that, but we're actually hiring a new firm to help us with the testing of water valves. and 5,000 feet of water lines replaced. We did about half of that last year. Again, we're ramping up over in Eastport to do a lot of water lines this coming 6 months. Worry-free utility services for our customers. So again, this goes back to the asset management system that we put together a few years ago, and to actually follow the recommendations in that. So all these benchmarks are from the asset management system for utilities. So 20,000 feet of sewer mains inspected. We're still ramping up to that goal and did 5,000. 100 sewer manhole inspections, and we did 42, and 6,000 feet of sewer lines relined, and we actually did 14,000, so we were well above that performance measure. This is more for the asset management system for utilities, so it goes to doing all the PM that we should be doing on the sewer lines, inspecting all fire hydrants annually, and that's actually required for the ISO classification the fire department has. The ISO system looks closely at the water system in addition to how the response time that the fire department has. And then to also do PM on the storm drains and produce high quality drinking water. So we had no water quality issues with our potable drinking water. We worked on about 265,000 lineal feet compared to 200,000 for the sewers. And we actually caught up on the fire hydrants. We were behind in 22, but we've caught up this year. And as you know, we still got the ISO 1 classification. So we met all the requirements. For solid waste, our goals are no more than 10 validated complaints each month. And we actually had 0 validated customer complaints. We had complaints, but most of them had to do with issues involving the set-outs. So we didn't have any that we validated as going back against the contractor. Our goal was 3,500 tons of recycling collected, and we made 2,800. 1,500 tons of yard trim collected, and the actual number was 1,900 tons. And then our diversion rate, which is material that would otherwise go to the landfill, gets diverted either as recycling or as yard trim. Our goal is 45% of the waste stream to be diverted, and what we actually made was 40%. Okay, so this is for the fleet services. We serve not only Public Works and Park and Rec, but also the fire department has a small fleet maintenance group at the Forest Drive station. Police has a small group at the police department. So all 3 of those are going to be consolidated out on Hudson when we move into the facilities. So that would free up some space that the fire department and police have in their respective buildings to use for other purposes. But also allow us to have the entire group in one location, which provides opportunities for efficiency and using different mechanics for different vehicles. So our main goal is the average age of the fleet. So for the fire department, we want that to be no more than 7 years. The police department, 7 years, and all others, 8 years. Fire department is actually at 8.1 years. Average fleet age, police department is 8 years, and all the other departments are 11 years. So we need to increase the acquisition of new vehicles to get newer vehicles in the fleet and reduce the age. When you have an older fleet like this, you have a lot more maintenance issues, a lot higher maintenance costs. So that's the result. Recapitalize our infrastructure assets in an effective and efficient manner. So this goes to the capital program, not just the routine upkeep, but actually replacing these assets. So our goal, as I mentioned, was greater than the 2 miles of street resurface each year. 4.5 would be the ideal. 3 would be the minimum that we should be doing, and we only did 2 last year. 15,000 square feet of sidewalks. We didn't have a sidewalk contractor for most of the year. We have 2 now, so we're going to pick up that number, but it was only 1,800 square feet last year. 5,000 feet of water lines replaced. We made 2,400, and we're overachievers in the sewer area. 6,000 feet was our goal, and we actually made 14,000, as I mentioned before. And then complete capital projects on time within budget's a goal. We don't actually have any numbers here, but our projects generally have been pretty timely. The garage is coming in on time and on schedule. The maintenance facility is going to be a month or 2 late. We thought it was going to be February, and it's actually going to be May completion. So generally, our projects have been timely. Our long-term goals, and these have been sort of our standing goals for a while. So we're still working on our American Public Works Association accreditation for the department. We're close to having that finished and just need to get that across the finish line. We've been working on that for probably 3 or 4, well, even more than that, probably 5 years. I selectively omit the 2 years that I was out of the department and forget that. So it was we probably were working on that for about 5 years. Provide superior customer service to constituents and customers. Establish continuous improvement culture. Establish and implement lifecycle asset management programs for city assets. We have a very active program, as I've mentioned, in water and sewer. We've actually requested an enhancement this year to do a similar asset management study for all of our city buildings and facilities, which would be very beneficial. Maintain complete, safe, high-quality street system, as I mentioned, that supports vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians, complete streets, and provide responsive and professional service delivery. Okay, so let's see. So our most successful performance measure accomplishment was in these 3 areas. So linear feet of water mains scanned for leaks, the linear feet of sewer mains relined, and that's the 3rd time we mentioned that, but we overperformed on the sewer side, and then the PM of all of our vehicles. The least successful were the linear feet of storm drains pipes maintained. We need to do better there. The average age of our fleet, and then the square feet of sidewalks. And we've got, as I mentioned, 2 contractors on board now, so we're going to catch up on the sidewalks. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. These are very detailed, and I've got slides that follow that describe what the changes were. So I'll just run through these very quickly and then get to the detailed information. So for Public Works Administration, the contract services increased because we brought the money for our city consultant, which is Eileen Fogarty, over from the city manager budget over to Public Works. So that's the big increase, and then we had a $600 increase for inflation. For engineering and construction, we have a $73,000 increase in contract services. It's
Just time out. Question to...
I was looking for the consultants. You said it was moved over from city manager. I'm looking for where that is. Is it in salaries and benefits?
It would be in contract services.
Contract services.
Yeah, I can go back up to that to show you.
Okay, yeah, I'm still on page 22. Always on page 22.
Whoops.
He jumped to
It's at the bottom.
the changes.
Okay. It's on page 22, is that
Here?
where?
Yeah, he
Okay.
skipped over those and then went to the list of the revisions.
Okay,
Okay, in the second line on this, the administration contract services, an increase from 42,000 to 167 on this page.
okay. Thank you.
So for engineering construction, we've got 41,000 for new construction inspection services. These are for inspecting development projects as they're being implemented. We haven't had enough staff to go out, and as the construction is going on those, to keep up with it, to make sure that, for instance, new water lines, new sewer lines, new storm drains are all being properly installed. So we've added $41,000 for that, those services. We've also added an additional $32,000 for traffic engineer, because the traffic engineering requests, traffic requests in general in the city are keep increasing in numbers and in complexity. So we need, and with Lisa Greco gone now, we need support from a traffic engineer to provide those services. So that's in addition to the funding that we already have for traffic engineering services. Let's see. The decrease in supplies was because there were a couple of one-time projects that were in that line item that have been removed. So the Wells Cove access improvements and Edgewood Road crosswalk were removed, so that decreased that budget. The contract services for streets was increased by $279 for Skipper's Lane. So when Willows develops and when Providence Point develops, both of those developments are going to extend Skipper Road across their property. But we're going to pay to have it extended across the American Legion property. So that's the $279,000. So the design of that's been completed by the Providence Point engineers. The actual construction is going to be done across American Legion by the Willows developer, but we're contributing $279 for that. There's also $19,500 for street lighting, and that was the subject of the recent emails about new street lights. And then we also added $70,000 for the brine equipment for snow removal out the new facility. That was actually funded this fiscal year because we haven't had the opportunity to see where that's going to fit with the new facility. After we get moved in, we pushed that back a year. So we're going to purchase that in FY24 instead after we're moved in and get settled in the new facility and figure out the best place to locate that new equipment. Traffic control and maintenance, we increased supplies by $10,000 to buy things like red paint and thermoplastic because of all the requests for those services. We didn't have snow this year, so no change in that. Facilities, we added $24,500 for the new armed guard here at City Hall. And then $50,000 to increase cleaning in Eastport and the Eastport Fire Station and the new Public Works facility. And then the rent increased at 45 Gorman. For sewer contract services, so we paid the county to operate the water reclamation facility down on Edgewood Road, and those costs increased by $14,000 in FY24. On the water side, the cost of all things related to water has increased. So the chemicals, the pipe, Everything that goes into producing treated water has increased significantly, so we've added money for that. We've also added $41,000. I mentioned the inspection services for new development, so that will cover the water portion of those inspections. We have similar amounts for the sewer system. And then I mentioned the water production costs. Watershed restoration, increase $121,000, $50,000 for maintenance of our BMPs that haven't been well maintained in the past, $41,000 for inspection of new infrastructure, and then we're going to ramp up the website and community education for stormwater. For the refuse fund, the cost of disposal has gone up pretty significantly, so we've had to add additional money for that. And the rates that are being proposed for refuse reflect those increases. And then the cost of fuel has also gone up pretty considerably. Fleet operations, $56,000 increase due to increases in the expenses for vehicles. So diesel, car parts, all of those have gone up. So most of these increases are just due to inflation, and with some of these issues, greater than others. A fleet replacement, we've asked for $3.3 million, and that's to cover the planned purchases for a new medic unit. We need to replace 15 to 20 police vehicles, a new front end loader for public works, air compressors, replacement of gasoline SUVs with electric SUVs or hybrids, and then 10% match for the purchases of buses that are grant funded. Any remaining money left over, we'll use the list that Danny maintains of the high priority replacement vehicles. So these are our list of our enhancements. I mentioned the light fixtures at Oxford Landing to replace 25 city-owned street light fixtures, just to match what the HOA has installed. That's been a project that's kind of been working its way through. And when we first got the proposal from BGE to replace those, it was about $10,000, and then it jumped to $15,000. Now it's $25,000. So we couldn't cover it in our operating budget, and so we asked for an enhancement for that.
David, just for clarification, are these enhancements included in the fiscal year 2024 budget?
They are.
Thank you.
They are. The carpet on the second floor of the police station needs to be replaced, so that $40,000 is funded. Most of these are one-time expenses, so I don't think we have any recurring expenses in here. Likewise, the front door at APD needs to be replaced, so we asked for $25,000 for that. I talked about the brine equipment that we just slid that back one fiscal year to allow us to move into our new facility and find a spot for it. I mentioned the facilities asset management plan, $100,000 to complete that plan. So that'll include a complete inventory of all the equipment and building features that should be on a maintenance type program, and then a condition assessments, and then plans or recommendations for completing both corrective and preventive maintenance on the buildings. And then Skipper's Lane is that 279 for the property across the American Legion. And that's it.
Okay. We're going to keep to a schedule. I know, speaking for myself, we all have interests in our own respective things. We're going to keep to schedule, and I know we all have our own interests in our own independent projects, but just let's all keep in mind that we're here to review the budget, and let's just, speak to how it relates to the budget. So, questions? Alderwoman?
I have a few. Are you ready?
You go ahead. I do
Thank
have questions. And they're all
Thank-
related to the budget.
Thank you. I appreciate all of the detail in that, and it sounds like we're well on our way to be in that new building pretty soon.
Yes.
Alderwoman Pindell Charles and I had an opportunity to walk through with your project manager on that last week, and quite impressive. But we were sad that you don't get an office there.
Sad what?
That you don't have an office in there.
Oh, no. No. We're staying downtown. So our engineering and admin group need to be downtown, close to planning and zoning and the law office and finance. So it's
Great.
just the operational groups that are going to be out there.
Right. It's really impressive. And I know that they're really excited about moving in. And I was happy to see that there's actually a conference room space that appears to be available for public use.
Yeah, and so we talked about that early on. This is in Alderwoman Pindell Charles's ward, that there was a need for a community meeting room. And so that will be available for that, and it should be a nice amenity.
That's great. That'll be really helpful to a lot of community groups. My questions kind of revolve around the sidewalks, and I know that in the budget it's sidewalk replacements. And I'm getting a lot of questions from constituents about sidewalks where sidewalks are not. And I know that we're working in Emerald Heights on the Cedar Park, but I'm having requests from other areas, and I know that we just received a letter from the state that it looks like the Ridgely Avenue sidewalk is going to be funded through the state. As far as getting other sidewalk projects initiated, do you see that that's something that we can probably do in the next fiscal year or two?
We can. So there's kind of two parts to that. So the funding that we get for sidewalks is to replace the existing sidewalks. So we have a standalone sidewalk replacement CIP, $600,000 per year funded for that. That's the one that we've hired two new contractors to help us catch up because we had sort of a year without doing much work. The second part is the infill sidewalks. So there's still some uncertainty under the code that we should be doing infill sidewalks at all because the code pretty clearly says that infill are the responsibility of the adjacent property owners. But those are typically standalone CIPs. So the ones that, like we've got one going in for Spa Road, we've got one for Edgewood Road. There's a number of them that we're doing, and those are standalone CIPs. So the first step typically is to put money in for planning for those so we can figure out what the rough cost estimate would be and lay all that out and get it properly into the CIP.
Great. And then I did want to say thank you very much for replacing the handrails and GOTS. My hands are very happy when I walk down the stairs. And then I've lost my notes. I'll give up the mic because I'll find it later. Thank you very much.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gerald, for your very comprehensive presentation. I have questions. Hillman Garage. How many spaces in Hillman Garage does the city have? And I'm thinking about staffing.
So we don't have any dedicated. Let me back up a little bit. So the old garage was 425 spaces. The new garage is going to be 588 spaces. When we were putting together the financial models for the financing, we assumed that things would continue as they were in the past, meaning that the city employees would be able to park there without any cost. And there was no revenue included in all the revenue projections for city employees to have to pay to park there. It was just assumed that they would park there basically 5 days a week during the day, during the normal working hours. That is where we're at. We didn't carve out any specific spots for them. The way that garage normally is, I think we all remember with the old Hillman garage that typically during work days when the city employees were parking there, it generally was never full. You could go up on the top floor and see that there were always a lot of spaces. And the days that we know that's going to fill up, we know that in advance usually. It's surrounding the boat show or the Blue Angels or the beginning of the legislative session, and we usually make other arrangements to have the city employees park somewhere else, so those purposes can be used. They can park in Hillman Garage. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but financially we didn't assume that there was any carve out for them, but also there was not going to be any cost to park in those because it's a larger garage, and the thought was that it would be available as well for city employees.
Well, thank you. I was thinking that, X number of spaces had been used by employees previously, and maybe there would be a carve out for X number of spaces to be dedicated to employees in the new garage.
Yeah,
But I had already spoken to Mr. Melanoff also, and I know you guys have worked out the details.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that I think if this is going to be done, that city vehicles shouldn't be left in the garages during the peak hours. So on evenings and weekends, when the garage does fill up, and we know that's the peak time is on weekends, there shouldn't be a whole bunch of city vehicles sitting in the garage. They should be parked elsewhere, and that can be done pretty easily. But during the day, when our employees park there during work days, I think there's enough capacity there without specifically carving out places for them.
Okay.
I think they should be up top, but that's my personal feeling. We should allow the paying customers to park on the more convenient lower level spaces and have the city employees park up. And that's not a disadvantage. There's solar panels up there now, so it's shaded. It used to be your car would sit in the sun and not be as appealing, but now there's solar panels up there.
I guess it depends on where the stairwell is also, as for easy access to the employees.
Right.
Anyway, Williams Whalen Field. Are they anywhere in, I saw something, I don't remember what page it was. Are we planning to do the capping or whatever the Office State Department of Environment tells us we have to do to make that field a usable field?
Yes, we are. So we're still working with MDE. We're working with them more broadly now on the whole parcel instead of just on Williams Whalen. We were just focused on Williams Whalen before, but the whole parcel to determine how much contamination. We think that most of it is on the Williams Whalen part of the parcel. So we're focused on trying to get that reopened up, to get the soil layer installed and then get it reopened up because it's been closed for quite some time now. But then to also figure out what remediation would be required on the rest of the site so that we could then use that for other purposes.
So are we looking at it coming online? It's a football field for the most part, and the season's coming up. And so what's the timeline? It
won't be for this season for sure. It's a slow process working with MDE, and they're very cautious. So they've asked us to do some additional testing before they approve the solution of just adding a soil cover. So we're going to do that additional testing. We're hiring an independent lab to do that for us. So that has to happen first. So we have to get the results back. We have to send them to MDE. They have to study them and analyze them and then let us know if they feel like that's adding the soil is going to be an adequate measure.
Okay.
So I think the long and the short, I think it'll be at least another year would be my guess based on where we're at right now. But we're trying to move that along as quickly as we can because we want to get that field open back up.
So is it usable at all, or have they forbidden us?
No, we just don't think it's prudent to knowing what we know now about what's in there and where it's located. We think we need to remediate it before we open it back up for use.
Okay, our only football field in the city. So that's unfortunate for our kids. When we move Public Works from SPA to Hudson Street. Is the Spa Road property going to need to be evaluated by MDE?
That's what I mean. So we're not just looking at Weems Wayland, we're looking at the
You're
whole
looking at
site
the
now.
whole-
Yeah, so there was a phase 1 done a few years ago,
I recall.
and the rest of the site's much cleaner than what Weems Wayland is. So Weems Wayland definitely, we think we're going to keep that as a playing field. That's the most, in our view, the most prudent thing, because otherwise we'd have to excavate all of that bad material and haul it to a landfill somewhere, which would be very expensive. We think it's better just to keep that as a playing field. We can add the layer of soil, we think, but the rest of the site we're going to do some additional investigation to make sure that that's clean and can be redeveloped for housing.
I would hope that we would make the field a priority, since it's
It is.
our only field.
Yes, ma'am.
And we
It
are
is.
denying kids right now the
Yes.
ability. And I know it's not by fault of our own, but I don't want us to wait on that field until we get any housing plans or anything for the rest of the property. We need to take care of that separately, I think, and apart.
Yeah.
Because
We
it will
agree.
be
And we think we can do both in parallel. So it's not like we can just do Weems Wayland. We can do them both in parallel. They have different tracks that they're going to go down, but
Okay.
we
Well-
think that we can do both.
I'm glad that you're on that. Resurfacing. What's the life expectancy now for our resurfacing? Is
Well,
it
we think
20?
we should be doing it every 20 years. Certainly you can wait 40 years, but you're not going to have a very good road surface at that point. So the ideal would be to resurface every 20 years. It's probably more like 25 to 30 years now.
So we had a chart at one time that indicated where every street was in that rotation. So we still following?
We still do, yeah. So we do an assessment of all of the entire street system every 4 years, and we determine what the remaining surface life is of each, not just each road, but each section of each road, and then prioritize them by the ones that need to have 0 remaining surface life.
I remember seeing the chart, and I'm sure I have it from years past. Same thing with sidewalks.
Same thing, exactly.
Yeah.
We do the same. At the same time, we do the assessment of the sidewalks.
You indicated Barbud, informational something for Barbud. Has Barbud not finished?
Barbud is not finished, but we're trying. So we've designed it. We had a public meeting. It was not well attended. It was only, I think, four people attended. So we're going to reschedule another one. We need to talk with them about what they really want. So we know we need to do some storm drain improvements. The big question is whether, and we know we're going to close off the street permanently from Forest, so you can only exit onto Forest but can't enter from Forest. So we need to get that made permanent. But the big question is sidewalks, whether they want sidewalks or not.
We should change the name to Kirby Lane for Kenny Kirby.
Or the never-ending project.
Absolutely, and that's why I was surprised to see it again. There were some residents who came and beat us up kind of regularly, if you remember.
I do.
About Barbud. I'm surprised that we can't reach out to them and have them
And
come
one of
back
those
and beat us up
residents
some
is still there and is very active still. So, yeah.
more. Red curbs. How does one get on the list, or is that? And I'm talking right now specifically to
You're on the
my
list.
community.
You're on the list.
I'm on the
yeah.
list. Okay.
Yeah.
Vehicle life expectancy. We are expanding the life expectancy from. Okay.
No. So Danny can address that. He's here, but he has established there's a sweet point in the life of a car where if you go beyond it, the maintenance cost goes up and it doesn't make sense to keep a car. But if you don't keep it to that point, then it's more expensive because you're buying them too often. So he's established what that sweet point is. It's 7 years for police vehicles, for example. If we go beyond it, then the costs go up. So right now we're higher. We have overage vehicles compared to what we should be replacing them at. So we need to start buying them. That will drive down the cost. Otherwise, we're just maintaining them, repairing them more than we should be.
So that's the 3.3.
Yes.
million that I saw.
Replacement. Yes.
So is it going to be a gradual?
Danny, you want to come up?
I know we can't do it all at one time, so do we have plans going forward to add X number for the next 5 years? Could you
The
introduce
vehicle
yourself?
life expectancy,
Could you give
last
us your
time I
name?
met with you all, I sent you
Dan.
all,
Give your name.
my name's Dan Harwith, I'm the fleet manager. The vehicle life expectancy, I gave you all a plan that we have in the city. I emailed it to you. I can email it to you again, what each vehicle type and what the life expectancy of that is. The goal is to keep adequation at a level and then repair and maintenance at a level. So when adequation is up, your repair and maintenance goes down. But when adequation is down, repair and maintenance go up. So you try to keep a level balance of that, to do that. So like a fire engine would be front line 10 years, second line 5, and get rid of it at 15. Where a car is at 10 years, you get rid of it. A police cruiser or anything in public safety would be 7 years. And that, because they run a lot more, they sit there like an ambulance, we have it as a 7-year replacement. Every 7 years, we have 7 ambulances, we get a new ambulance. That's the reason, because they sit there, they didn't get a lot of miles, but they get a lot of hours because they're going to there and sitting there on site.
So is there a plan, and is that part of what you're sending us, so that we know how many we need to get this year, but we need to plan for how many we need to add for next year and the following year?
Yes, I can send that to, email that all to
Okay.
you, what I have. I've already emailed it once, but I can do it again.
I'm sorry, we probably lost it.
That's fine.
fault.
That's why I keep it. Now, I'll email it to each and every one of you. That way you see what the vehicle replacement plan is for the certain types of vehicles.
That's greatly appreciated. I think the fact that we created this fleet department is quite beneficial, because everybody's not doing their own thing. You've got a handle on what everybody needs, when they need it, et cetera. So I think that's awesome. Skipper Lane. There's a piece of property that's not American Legion, it's not Providence Point, it's not the Willows. Is that already acquired to create that
So you're talking about
continuous
that
road?
narrow strip that's actually part of the Willows property.
Oh, so they have acquired it then?
Well, they acquired it when they acquired that whole property. Because remember when we were looking at that site for the Public Works facility, that would have been part of what we acquired as well if we would acquire that property. So it went with the property. What they plan to do is actually a conservation easement, and they plan to just turn it over to the American Legion to let them own it and maintain it, and American Legion wants to put gardens on it, which is great. I mean, that's what it should be used for. So that's the plan, but that's part of the Willows property. So they would be responsible to build the road across that piece of property. It's very narrow.
I remember the owner was not willing to give it up for a long time. So I'm glad to hear that's all worked out.
Yeah.
So it's going to go from by Newtown Drive all the way over to Providence Point, potentially.
And all
to
the way
Spa Road.
through Providence Point.
Right.
Right.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you for the Oxford Landing lighting. You know, we've been going back and forth. When BG&E comes in to change the type of lighting, do we automatically change ours to match
We
theirs?
try to, and that's why we've been working with them for months to try to get that done at the same time they do. And as the costs kept going up from BGE, we lost the ability to fund that from our operating budget. So that's why we had to come in for an enhancement this year.
And all of your enhancements were included in the mayor's budget?
Correct.
So you had no enhancements that were not included?
Correct.
Okay, and I think it's my last question. Armed guard at the police, at City Hall. So we're not using APD, or?
So that's so I can address that. So that's right. The cost to have an APD officer here is exorbitant, because they're on overtime when they're here. That's not a regular assignment. So when they put them here, so we hired an armed guard instead, and the cost is much less, and we still have the same service, right? And an armed guard sitting there.
Okay, so is the armed guard here 8 to 4? because I see armed guards, but they're our officers when we're here in the evenings particularly. But is this a company we've hired to come in during the day?
So they still bring an APD officer for the council meetings, but I think when the building closes and there aren't meetings here, they don't keep an armed guard here. It's just during the hours that it's open, the building's open. And I don't know if I think most of the commission meetings are virtual now, so I think there's not that many nighttime meetings here any longer.
Okay, I guess I was looking to see whether that 25,000 would go into APD's overtime budget or whether we have a contract, but it sounds like we have a contract.
It's a contract.
It's a contract and it's in DPW buildings.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not at City Hall?
No, that's
No,
where it was budgeted.
Where it's budgeted. It's in
They
the
they just put that
DPW
money into
facilities
the-
budget.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think that exhausts my questions. Thank you, Mr. Gerald.
Thank you, Alderwoman Finlayson. I think we're doing good on time. I'll just take a few minutes. Just a couple Budget 101 questions and then some others. So 72% of your budget is enterprise and 28% is other. Just so I understand, the costs that you have for enterprise, is that just the staff, related staff, or how do you allocate?
So it's everything. So it's staff, it's
Everything.
contract services, it's materials, everything that goes into running those, because those are all separate operations.
Correct, yeah.
So it pays for all
Self-
services
self-
related to that.
Self-supporting, if you will,
Yes.
yeah. How is fleet operations supported? The
So
revenue coming in?
Jody, you may want to answer that.
Fleet operations is supported by transfers that are budgeted within the contract services category of each department and fund that has vehicles. So if I have a vehicle in finance, in my repair and maintenance vehicles account, which is within the contract services category, there's a charge to my budget, and that money monthly goes over to Danny's budget so that he can operate and maintain the vehicles.
Okay, so it's not revenue coming in, it's just a budget allocation from the department?
Yeah, over to that fund. In addition, the fleet replacement fund,
Yes.
that's supported by one significant transfer from the general fund it's in finance non-allocated. It's, this year it's $3 million, close to $3 million, going over to fleet replacement. And the other funds that have vehicles also have to contribute to the vehicle replacement fund.
Okay. I think it's important for the public watching, yeah, right? That every department carries its own inflation, and we have no bottom line inflation added to the budget. I think that's an important point. Director Jarrell, you spoke of having additional inspectors. There's a current ordinance, on stormwater, adding additional inspectors. That is totally separate. And do you feel right now that you have inspectors? This is an operational question, but are you comfortable with the number of inspectors that you've added?
Yeah, so those other inspectors, the environmental compliance inspectors, are just looking mostly for erosion sediment control violations. And so they're checking the sites for that specific purpose. There hasn't been inspectors looking at all the infrastructure that's going in. So planning and zoning has building inspectors, so they're checking on the vertical construction, but nobody has been inspecting the horizontal construction at all. So that's why we're adding these additional inspectors to inspect that as the project proceeds. So water, sewer, storm drains, roads, sidewalks, nobody has been inspecting those until final inspection. But as you know, if you wait till final inspection, it's too late.
Yeah.
So it's better to check as you go along. So that's why we're adding those additional costs, those additional services.
You mentioned there's technology involved in I don't know what term you use in X-raying existing utility lines. Is that
So leak detection is what, yeah.
is in your budget? That's
Right.
ongoing.
We added additional money for that.
I know the city manager's in here, and just a general comment, I think, and maybe you can relate this to the city manager, these fees are going up, and it is very clear when you look at the performance measures that you have. I know they're allocated on different slides. I really think that there should be a list of those generated by the city to validate the increase. I mean, it's very self-explanatory when you see the utility work that you've accomplished.
Right.
I think that's important for messaging.
Well, I think that the new assistant city manager with her background in performance measures will get us there. I have maybe she.
There she is.
There she is.
Okay.
I have great faith that she's going to get us there.
Yeah.
It just takes a lot of effort to do that.
The org chart, when you have the stormwater interface, et cetera, is there any interface with any other department now? Is that just within your department?
No, so stormwater is involved with all the departments, because all the departments, we have these minimum control measures for stormwater, and they include housekeeping of our buildings to make sure there's no runoff of oil and grease or other contaminants. So they're involved with the other departments as well. Mm-hmm. They're involved not just with the restoration projects, but all of those minimum control measures. So like illicit discharge, they're when we get reports of those, they go and investigate those. But yeah, they provide training. Some of our pollution prevention plans have to be prepared for each department, so they're involved with all of that.
Okay. What is your obstacle in accreditation? But just time?
Yeah, so the first thing that we had to do is go through and develop SOPs for everything that we do. So we're about complete with that. As we move through, they keep updating what the requirements are for accreditation. So we're playing catch up all the time. So yeah, we just have a couple of areas that we need to wrap up and review and get submitted, and then we need to bring them out to do the inspections that are required, they being representatives of American Public Works Association.
Okay, well, good luck with that. I just heard the timer. We do need to stay on schedule because we have a visual, we have a remote presentation scheduled at 10:45. Contractual services, it seems like they're increasing. I thought the goal was to try to reduce contractual services, or what is your?
So we don't have employees that are contractors. What we do is we hire out, in most of our areas, we hire contractors to augment staff. So like when we have a main break, if there's 3 main breaks going on, we bring in underground construction to support because we just run out of people. In our facilities area, we don't have for example, we don't have an electrician on board. So all of the electrician services, we hire contractors. So that's what feeds that contract services account.
Okay. Got it. And my last question is the interface with the capital budget. In reviewing, I know everybody should know that we're going to have a review of the capital budget projects on Thursday work session, and I assume you'll be here with the respective project managers. Thank you for that, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. From my view of the capital budget, it appears that there have been some added. And so is your staffing reflective of the?
That's a great question.
Yeah, because we got the same response. The response we got from Parks and Recs was, well, we'll see if we have enough for the respective park maintenance.
Yeah, it's difficult. Our engineers all have full plates.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes projects don't get started as early as we'd like because they're finishing up other projects, then they'll move on to these new ones.
Yeah.
So, there's a right level of staffing. You don't want to overstaff and then have people not busy. You want to keep them busy, but sometimes the projects get delayed a little bit because we just don't have capacity to start them right away.
But you've put the estimates together for those additional projects that are listed?
Yeah, we've taken a little different approach though, because instead of trying to guesstimate what the design and construction cost is, we put money in
good thing.
initially for planning. And we do the planning and conceptual design, and that way we get a good cost estimate and a good schedule, and then that informs future year. So you'll see a lot of the projects that we talk about this year just have planning money initially, and then we'll move to design and construction later after we do the planning.
Okay, you can hire me. No. I think that's it, because Stantec is here.
Okay.
But there will be some other questions, we'll email.
Well, not a question really, but in a couple of years ago, I think, Director then Gerald, or City Manager Gerald, I'm not sure what position you were in, you had a list of all of the things that we were doing.
Yeah.
And it was published in the paper. And I think that was of great value to the community because they have no clue all the projects that we have going. So I would suggest that we do that again.
And we can certainly do that. We were here just a few months ago too, remember? And we had all of the project
excellent.
managers here, and we went through every single project, provide the list and went through every
Yeah.
single project.
I sent that out to my constituents, and
Yeah.
that, I got such good feedback on that, just the,
Yeah, so we're
list of
happy to
status.
provide updates of
I think
that.
you're
Yeah,
interested in
I
the
think we should,
status of them, right? Yeah, just not just what they are, but the status.
Well,
like you did
yeah,
before.
but to let the community know just how many balls we have in the air at one time, and most of which, they're all moving. It's not like we're stuck on something, but I just thought it was extremely valuable then, and I think it would be again. Thank you.
Yeah, we can't assume that they read the capital improvement.
Well, it could be on our website. It doesn't have to be in the paper.
Okay, so we're going to recess for, sorry, if you give us like 10 minutes, is that okay? Okay, exactly 10 minutes, thanks.
Are they staying, ladies? Are they staying? The ladies? What is it?
They'll introduce themselves.
Yeah.
So that we have the opportunity to speak with these directors. Is it, what date is that?
No problem.
We're back from recess. Thank you very much. So we've allocated, a full hour for you, so we just ask that you introduce yourself. And then are you running the presentation from here?
I am.
Okay, all right. And David, you're in the background, right? You don't want to be at the table? Okay. All right, okay. All right. My name's Alderwoman Tierney, and my colleague is Alderwoman O'Neill to my right, and Alderwoman O'Neill to my...
And Mason on her right.
What did I just say?
O'Neill.
Okay, good. Got it. And then we also have Alderwoman Bindle Charles here and Alderman Day. So the segment includes questions at the end.
Sounds
Thanks. Go ahead.
good. Great. Well, good morning. We're really happy to be here today. My name is Lisa Griesever, and I work for Stantec. With me today is Tracy Mower. And the agenda that we're going to go through, I think, might actually not take an hour, but we have plenty of time for questions. We're going to take a look at the Water and Sewer Fund, the Stormwater Fund, and the Refuse Fund. We've been working with your staff on the fiscal year 24 required rates and revenue needed to fund all the operating and capital expenditures that you're planning for next year. We're also looking at a 10-year financial model, so we'll talk not just about the rates for next year, but also future years moving forward. We're going to talk about water and sewer first, but as we walk through each of the funds, we'll go through the revenue requirements for each of the services. So that'll include the operating and maintenance expenses predicted or proposed and forecasted for next year through the fiscal year 24 budget. We'll look at the capital improvement programs that you have as well for fiscal year 24. We'll look at the existing debt schedules that you have for each of the funds and any proposed debt that we might suggest for funding of future capital. We'll look at the revenue forecast. What is your customer base collecting now from rates and charges? What anticipated growth do we expect, and what future revenue streams do you have under those existing rates? And we'll be calculating what the required increases need to be for you to be able to fund your expenses. We look at some key metrics. We want to maintain and establish balances and reserves when needed for each of the funds, rainy day operating funds, as well as repair and maintenance funds. And then we want to just be able to meet our debt service payments each year. So I'm going to pass it over to Tracy. She's going to walk through water and sewer first, and then I'll do the remaining.
Hello, my name is Tracy Mower, as Lisa had mentioned, from Stantec. So we are going to start with the water and sewer fund and talk about each separately as a fund. And as Lisa had mentioned, we're starting each with your fiscal year 24 budget. On the water side, the total budget is about $10.5 million. 5.3 million, or about a little over half, is your operating and maintenance expenses, which include salaries, repair and maintenance, things of that sort. And then another 3.5 million is your current existing debt service payments. And in fiscal year 24, that's about 33% of your overall budget. And finally, any cash funded capital projects you have, which makes up the remaining $1.6 million for fiscal year 24. Go to the next slide. For the sewer fund, similarly, we have it broken down into those three main areas, and it's an $8.1 million budget in fiscal year 24. Obviously, the majority of the sewer budget is your operating and maintenance expenses, totaling over 80% at $6.5 million. Again, you have those existing debt service payments that total $1.1 million in fiscal year 24. And your cash funded capital in 24 is $375,000. Looking forward, what we do is we project each of those to see over the 10-year financial plan how each of those operating capital and debt service expenses grow. So if you look at the top line, those are that 51% on the water pie chart, the $5.3 million. We look at your operating expenses on a line item basis and inflate them based on your category, and they grow to about a little over $7 million through our 10-year planning period. Then we go through your capital expenses, and we start with that cash-funded capital. That's at the $1.6 million, and we have a consistent $1.47 million planned cash capital projects each year for the planning period. Your existing debt service is actually declining over the next several years, starting at $3.52 million, going down to about 3.46, and then growing again when you have an additional planned debt coming on. And then we have projected debt service. So within your capital projects, you have what you're paying for in cash, and then any future bonds you're planning. So we like to add into our financial plan the projected debt service payments for each of those projected bond issues in the future. And if we see our total capital expenses are also growing each year for the planning period, starting at $5.48 million, growing to about $7.37 million by fiscal year 33. We add those together to get your total water expenses or your total required revenues you need to pay for each year through, I said revenues, I meant expenses, excuse me, sorry about that, which you need to fund through your retail rate revenues as well as any miscellaneous revenues you collect. So currently you are collecting about $9.63 million in water revenues, which includes all of those fixed and variable fees that you charge your customers as well as the miscellaneous revenues. If there are no increases in your rates, you will see that your expenses exceed your revenues, and the water fund will not be self-sustaining through the planning period. Can you go to the next slide? Going through that same process on the sewer fund, again, we start with those O&M expenses, operating and maintenance expenses on our top line, and we inflate each line item based off of the expense category. We then have those same capital categories of your planned cash-funded capital projects, your existing debt service payments, and then the projected debt service based on any bond-funded capital you're planning on for the future. Currently in fiscal year 24, again, the total sewer expenses are $8.16 million, growing to about $11.18 million for the planning period. Current sewer revenues, which include those fixed and variable revenues you charge your customer base, as well as your miscellaneous revenues, total $8.28 million, which does cover your expenses in fiscal year 24. However, looking forward, if as your costs increase and your spending increases, if your revenues stay the same, then it will not be a self-sustaining fund. So this is just looking at, again, water and sewer separately. So we take your current available cash balance in your water fund, and talking with city staff, we want to maintain a minimum balance of 6 months of operating within the fund. And although we do meet that minimum balance right now, as you can see, if we do not have any financial plans in place, that operating balance within the next 5 years is going to go below our minimum balance and then go into the negative in the future with expenses exceeding revenues. Similarly, on the sewer fund, we also want to maintain that 6 months operating expense balance. So starting with our current operating fund, the real story here is that our expenses are exceeding our revenues. So each year it's just going down and it's compounding against itself and getting further and further out to negative balance starting in fiscal year 31 and growing beyond that. So after talking with city staff, we wanted to look at an attainable financial plan for both the water and the sewer fund. Looking out over the next several years, we are recommending a 4.75% increase on the water side for the fixed and variable rates, as well as a 3% increase on the sewer side, and maintaining those increases over the next at least 4 years through fiscal year 27. This will allow each fund to fund all of their operating expenses, all of their existing debt service requirements, and be able to fund future capital needs. We do have similar increases for the entire planning period beyond fiscal year 27 to make sure that revenues stay up with increasing costs. So when we apply the water fund increases, we are maintaining that minimum balance over the next several years through fiscal year 29. While the out years look a little bit scary, we're confident in keeping this financial plan now as to not make sure we're overcharging customers, and the future years, keeping an eye on it annually to make sure that we keep revenue increases appropriate with expense increases. But right now we feel the 4.75 is appropriate for the water fund. And on the sewer side with 3%, 3% is really an inflationary increase with all of the increases of costs currently in the economy. And as you can see, for the entire planning period, this keeps the sewer fund healthy, keeps it above minimum balances. If anything comes up on the sewer side, we would feel as though the fund is in a very good position to take on any additional costs that come on in the future. I think there's one more. Okay. So what this looks like with that 4.75% increase on the water side and 3% on the sewer side is your fixed fees would go to $13.78 for your 1 inch or less, or your average customer on the water side, and $13.84 for sewer. And then 0 to 7,000 gallons would go to $4.34 per 1,000 gallons, increasing to $8.71 for tier 2, and then $13.04 for tier 3 over 20,000 gallons water usage rates. Any non-residential water would have a flat variable rate of $6.47 no matter their volume. And then all sewer usage would also have a flat variable rate of $6.09 no matter their customer class or volume. And what that looks like on the average bill, this chart shows what your current bill is. The orange would be your water bills and the black would be the sewer bills. And it shows that if you increase each of those rates, your average bill for a 12,000 gallon per quarter water and sewer customer would go up about $6.53 per quarter in fiscal year 24, which is a little over $2 per month. And you can see how those bills increase over the next 3 years with those projected increases we showed before of the 4.75 and 3 over the next 4 years. And comparatively, if we look at that, oh, I'm sorry, I thought we had a, oh, so that is the water and sewer fund. I don't know if you want to do questions for each fund first, or you want to wait for all the questions at the end.
Maybe questions on water and sewer first,
Sure.
I think, because, yeah, then it will get a little complicated. Yeah, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Thank you, and this is great. I love the visuals, English teacher. Can you tell us exactly what the residents are paying currently? So I'm on page 15. So right now they're paying $168
Yes.
annually?
No, that's quarterly.
That's quarterly?
Yes.
Okay, so your recommendation is for 24 to increase that to $174 quarterly. So we're talking, what, $6?
Yes.
Okay, and that is for both water and sewer?
Correct, as a combined bill.
Okay. I really appreciate your long-range picture. You stop at 2027. But we could decide to carry that out to 2033, which is, and that would keep us above water in essence. It would give us the flexibility to not have to worry about it, I guess I should say.
In If everything goes to plan over the next 10 years, yes. But as we've seen in recent history, some things can come up. So that is why we like to focus on a 3 to 5 year projection, because it gets a little bit risky out in the future with what's going to happen.
And the 3% you said is usually across the board for inflation, no matter what.
100%,
So
yes.
even if we didn't go to 4.75, it would be 3%. Just because of inflation.
Well, the costs that you incur yourself on your operating and maintenance side are going to be increasing every year due to inflation, which on average, if you look at, the municipal cost index or construction cost indices, are 3% at least.
Okay. And is our percentage of debt service a norm? I'm looking at page 5, we're 33%. So is that a norm?
I would say what we like to recommend is staying around 30 to 35%. So you're right in there. Yes. Once you get over 50%, it's when we want to start looking at what we can cash fund instead. But yes, that is very normal and appropriate.
And we're way under on the sewer at, 14%. So, well, great. Thank you.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
No questions at this time.
Just a couple, let me go back to the slide, just to try to understand this. The projected debt service, why is it so erratic, if you will? The numbers on page 7, what's going on there?
Sure. So what we are planning is within your capital plan on the water side, and I'm just going to bring up my detail for a second to make sure I don't misspeak. But we are planning on having a new debt issue of about $3.4 million per year, which brings on an additional debt service payment each year. So that's why you see it growing.
But okay, but again, it's not a constant increase, 0.53 to 0.76 to 0.99, 1.22. Is that the interest or?
Put up slide 7 so I can see what she has.
So that projected debt service line 0.28 to 0.53. So that's the debt service payment associated with each of the new debt issues each year.
Okay, so I guess they changed.
Look at the two lines together. The existing debt service is our debt service on our current issues.
Right.
And then they project them. When you add them together,
Yep.
hopefully they're more consistent, and would generally grow a little over time.
And some of your existing debt service payments are finishing. So that's why they drop. For example, you have one debt issue that's ending in fiscal year 29, so that's going to drop it a little bit. So that's why the existing, if you're adding them together or just looking at the existing debt service, it kind of goes up and down each year a little bit.
Okay. And where's the minimum balance shown?
Just on slides 9 and 10.
Okay, just in a graphic.
Correct.
Right. Okay. And that choice was based on what, again?
Discussions with city staff and our recommendation. We always recommend at least 6 months of operating as a minimum balance.
And how does that compare to last year, that minimum balance? Is that changed year to year?
So the calculation of 6 months of expenses will change as our budget goes up. That percentage will grow, but we've been using these rate studies for years. So every year when we come to you and set the rates, it's based on that 6 months projected balance, and we set the rates accordingly to maintain it.
Okay. And lastly, where is inflation benefit? I'm understanding inflation has benefited you, or you brought up inflation. How does that tie into your?
Sure. So on the total operating expenses, if you look at slide 7 or 8, either one, so that total operating expenses top line, what we do is we take your detailed budget and line item by line item, we will use different inflationary factors that we feel are appropriate to inflate your operating expenses every year to make sure that we're recovering all appropriate costs in the future.
So what did you use?
We use 3 to 4% depending. So 4% more on like supplies, maintenance, construction costs, and 3% more for the personal services side.
Okay. And last year, and I know we're going to get to storm, but we had to justify this increase, to the public and to our constituents. It was very helpful to get a comparison with other jurisdictions.
Sure.
Will you be able to provide that?
Of course.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we'll go into storm water, right? Is that what's next?
Yes, it is. So I'll be talking about the Stormwater Fund and then the Refuse Fund, and we could do questions after each to make it easier. So in fiscal year '24, the revenue requirements for the Stormwater Fund include $1.5 million of operating and maintenance expenses, which is about 76% of the revenue requirements. We have $300,000 that we're going to pay in cash for capital improvements and $175,000 for debt service from existing. And in the future, when we look at that, it'll include new capital. In general, the Stormwater Fund has seen an increased spending over the past couple years. There had been a reserve that was building up that you're now spending because of all the improvements and great work that you're doing in the community. So future CIP, we are going to be showing, similar to the Water Fund that we showed, that we're going to need to fund more through additional bonds. And so you're going to see that grow over the projection period. A point that we wanted to talk about for fiscal year '24 is that the O&M expenses have increased about 10% over fiscal year '23. Significant portion of that increase, almost all of it, is due to the increase in contract services, as well as some increase in salaries and benefits. So looking at the projection period for the expenses, we have, starting fiscal year '24, we'll need about $2 million of expenses. 1.5 of that is operating and maintenance. The remaining is associated with the capital program, cash funded capital, and existing and future debt service. Over 10 years, those expenses or revenue requirements are going to grow to a little over $3 million. And as you can see, the revenues from existing fees, assuming no increase in the rates, would remain around $1.8 million. So over this time frame, currently your existing revenues will not meet the expenses next year, and the deficit would just grow over time. This is, you're starting out a balance with a reserve balance there of about $1 million, a little over, at the end of fiscal year '23. And we would be with no rate increases. Again, this is not something we would do, but you'll quickly use those funds just to maintain your current spending levels. And by fiscal year '26, you would be using all of the reserve that you have. So we're going to continue to escalate stormwater fees to meet both the operating and capital needs. The magnitude of adjustments are associated with the capital funding plan, assuming some cash funding and bond funding of future improvements. As well as the capital execution schedule. As we mentioned, I think that there's been an increase in spending recently where the projects and improvements are being completed. So there's a 7% increase in stormwater fees necessary over the next 4 years to meet the needs of the stormwater system, both operating and capital. With these 7% increases, you can see that we are just able to meet our minimum balance. This minimum balance is also 6 months of operating expenses. So we dip a little bit below that in years fiscal year '26 and '27. But with the recommended rate plan that we have, our revenues start to meet our expenses and exceed a little, and we're able to then meet our minimum fund balances in fiscal year '29 and forward, which this projection shows a 3% increase starting in fiscal year '29. What does this mean for the fees? So what we're showing here is the current fees as well as the proposed for fiscal year '24 for your residential customers, both single family, multifamily, as well as the tiered structure for your non-residential. This is a 7% increase. So a quarterly fee of $21.35 for a single family customer will be increasing to $22.84 in 2020 or in fiscal year '24. For a multifamily customer, you'll be paying $11.42, and non-residential customer rates are shown there as well with the 7% increase based upon the size of the impervious area on the property. And what we do have here for the stormwater fee is the comparison of quarterly bill with the current Annapolis charges, the proposed Annapolis charges for fiscal year '24, as well as how it compares to jurisdictions around the area. So at the quarterly bill of $22.84, the rates are still well in line with your neighbors and adjacent communities. Silver Spring, Tacoma Park, and some areas closer to the district are a little bit higher, where Gaithersburg, Anne Arundel County, and Baltimore are right around the same as you.
We're going to ask questions on this before we go to refuse. Any questions?
I'm not sure it's a question. I'm just looking at page 23, which is the one still up. So right now, we are much less, because we're always compared to the county. How come it's cheaper to do business in the county or live in the county? So is there a suspicion that the county will have to increase this year or next year also?
Yeah, right, that we are doing this rate survey, and most of the rates that we found here were associated with fiscal year '23. So we're comparing your fiscal year '24 proposed rate to a '23 current rate for all of these jurisdictions. We don't have any specific knowledge of what is going to happen in the county, but just the industry, and knowing that there has been significant inflation over the past couple of years, we would assume that it is likely to increase in all of these jurisdictions.
Just trying to make the argument that we're going to have to make
Yes, absolutely.
increases. So, thank you.
Director Dickinson, do you have a comment?
No, I was just going to add that on May 1st, when the county introduces their budget, you may see something similar on their side to address inflation factors. I can't say that for sure, but that very well could happen.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Thank you very much. I just have a quick question as I'm trying to understand, and I'm comparing the projections from last year that we received to this year. And last year, it was looking like we were looking at a lower percentage moving out, and if that makes sense. And I just want to see, is it inflation that is driving that difference?
If I'm not mistaken, I thought we still had 7% last year, followed by 5s and then 3s. And I might have that wrong, but I thought that's what I remembered. This time we took the 7 out one more additional year, and then we followed by 3%.
Okay.
Yeah. And really had a lot to do with just maintaining that fund balance. So I think we found that the utility had spent additional funds that we weren't exactly sure they were going to spend on the capital side, which decreased the amount of funding we had. So we had a little less there to begin with in '23 than we thought, which then adjusted the plan so that we can maintain that minimum balance over time. And
thank you.
Last year, I think it was 7%, or maybe I'm confusing it with another fee on 8, but at least I understood it as sort of a skew increase because it was post-pandemic. Ductile iron pipe increase was pretty significant. And then we have this ongoing backdrop, and Director Jarrell might be able to speak to this, is that we have limited land, unlike the county, to implement the MS4 permit requirements. Is that a factor? Or
It would be a
operationally?
factor in the development of the capital improvement program, so I can't speak to the technicalities of what that might be doing to the cost estimates in the capital program, but we've taken the capital program fiscal year 24 numbers and are looking at those expenses as projected in the capital budget and how we would fund those over time.
Director Jarrell, could you speak to that? Because that just seems like that's going to deteriorate as we have less and less opportunity to implement.
Yeah, I think that our capital projects were pretty well captured and projected. I think what's causing the increase is, like, we added the environmental compliance inspector.
Right.
We had the program manager. We need to start adding more
Right.
maintenance for our BMPs. Because if you don't maintain these structures, these stormwater structures, they don't work.
Right.
And so, that's something that MDE is really emphasizing on those MS4 reports, is that we spend more for maintenance to keep up the things that we have. So we need to start putting more money towards that. So that's going to drive this in the future. Not so much the capital projects, because the restoration projects that are required by the MS4, we're meeting all of those. In fact, we're ahead of schedule on those.
Oh.
But it's the maintenance and the enforcement that we haven't been doing as well, that we need to add additional funding for.
So were you involved in estimating these projections?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That's all I have. So you can go on to refuse.
Sure. Okay. So a little bit of background on the City Refuse Fund. The city contracts out, as you know, a majority of the services for collection and disposal in the refuse program. In 2019, there was a new multi-year agreement that had substantially increased the costs, and we're seeing that that's continuing based upon the contract requirements. And refuse fees have been increased over the past 3 years to begin aligning the revenues that we need with the expenditures that are going out. In fiscal year 24, we have about $4 million of operating and maintenance expenses. 73% of the $4 million are related to the contracted services, and the O&M expenses have increased about 33% over the past 4 years. And that's your fiscal year 21 actual numbers to the fiscal year 24. Heavily related to the contracted services, in fuel increases, material increases, and inflation all dictate the expenses in those contracts. For looking at the revenue requirements over time in fiscal year 24, as we mentioned, you'll need about $4 million to fund the operating expenses. There's very little existing debt service in this fund, and there is no existing debt service projected. There is one cash-funded capital investment in fiscal year 2029 of a new refuse collection truck. But the majority of expenses for the refuse fund are all in the operating and maintenance and contracted services. Over the 10-year period, we're going to see the revenue requirements grow from $4 million to $5.25 million. And currently, we collect about $3 million from your existing rates and charges and miscellaneous fees. Therefore, our revenues are not meeting our expenses. We have a little bit of growth shown here in the projection. So you can see revenues are increasing each year, even though there's no rate increase shown in this projection here. The increases that you do see are just from potential infill and growth in the city. With no rate increases, you can quickly see that the refuse fund would not be self-sustaining. We would not be able to maintain our minimum balances. So the financial plan considerations, like we mentioned, the expenditures are currently exceeding revenues, and the expenditures are anticipated to continue to escalate. To ensure the sustainability within the refuse program, the adjustments would be necessary. And at this time, we're recommending increases higher than we did last year, 4 years of a 10% increase between fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 27. With the 10% increases, you can see that the fund is able to self-sustain. Beginning in about fiscal year '28, your revenues will meet your expenses, and we can therefore show a 3% increase after that, just to keep up with the annual inflation. Under this plan, you will be able to maintain the minimum balance of 6 months operating expense. We wanted to show a little historical and recommended fee here. So I think in the past we showed, back to about fiscal year 15 when the bill was $325 annually. And just last year in fiscal year 23, we kind of got back to that same rate. We had seen a decrease in rates over time and then a slow increase. In fiscal year 24 with the 10% increase, we're looking at just over $350 annually. And a comparison of the refuse fees for single-family residential customers are shown here. Again, I'll preface that the Annapolis is showing, we're showing the fiscal year 24 proposed rates for the city, and we are showing a fairly high rate there in comparison. However, all of these other jurisdictions are showing the fiscal year 23 rate. We don't really have the information yet to know what will be changing in terms of the refuse fees in these jurisdictions. Again, similar to stormwater, we assume that they'll be seeing increases as well for the same reasons as we are here. That concludes the refuse section. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions? Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, thank you. The increases for refuse, are they directly tied to the contracts or the contract that we have with the company, the refuse company?
Yeah, they're the contract, and the contract expenses are the driving force behind the increases. We're seeing from fiscal year 23 to 24, we saw a little over a 10% increase, but from 21 to 24, we're seeing 33% increase in operating and maintenance expenses, mostly
33%?
33%, mostly related to the contracted services. And so at the same time, we didn't increase revenues by 33%. Right. So we're already behind the game.
So we have a contract with an automatic escalation or escalator in it, it sounds like.
The details of the contract I'm not 100% clear on, but I do know that the contract has increases built in for fuel and other materials, so that when those materials have increased with inflation and have had double-digit inflation over the past couple of years, I think the contract has been hit with those expenses.
Maybe I could ask Mr. Jarrell, what's the life of this contract? And are we paying the normal rates with a 33% increase over, what, 3-4 years?
Yeah, so we contracted out refuse collection back in 2012, and we did 7-year contracts. So the base contract was 2012 to 19. And then we resolicited and redid the contract, and our current contractor took over in 2019. We were getting an unbelievable deal with Bates, so that allowed us to decrease the rates from about $3.80 when they took over down to those low numbers. It was like $2.11 or something that we were towards the end of Bates's contract, and during that time, even though we were decreasing rates each year, we were still increasing the fund balance. The fund balance is huge at the end of that 7-year contract. So we resolicited, we got good bids, but they were all significantly higher than the Bates contract. And we had problems with the Bates contract. I think you all remember some of the service issues that we had. So instead of, when we did the new contract, and they were the low bidder, and they've been a good contractor, the service has been much better, but they're much more expensive. So we've been doing artificially low rate increases so that we could use up the fund balance that we have. So now we're at the point where we need to increase them to greater amounts because the fund balance isn't as large as it was when they took over. So that's kind of where we're at now is we need to keep the fund balance about where we're at now until we need to increase the rate to fully pay for all of the costs where we were taking a lot of it from fund balance in the past few years.
I'm not sure that I'm hearing everything that you said, but
Yeah.
I know we have a contract with Bates. And how many years left on that contract? I know you said they were the lowest
So the base
bidder.
contract was for 7 years. It was from 2012 to 2019. We have MBG now. They're our new contractor, and they started in 2019, and that's also a 7-year contract. So we have them for another 3 years, and then we'll resolicit. But the numbers with Bates, the costs were artificially low. So we were getting a great deal, and we were able to accumulate a large fund balance. We were able to push down the rates. So we were way below what the county was. But now we're kind of paying the piper. We're getting back to where we should be with this contractor. They bid it at more reasonable rates, and so that's where we're at now. Is we've used the fund balance to cover some of the costs of the last few years, but now we need to increase the rates so that the revenue that we get covers the expenses and not use fund balance any longer.
Did we increase our rates for 23?
We did.
We did. Was it 10%?
I believe it was 8.
I don't recall. It was
Yeah, it
8.
was 8%.
8%? Okay, but going forward, the recommendation is a 10% increase.
Right.
It is 10% till fiscal year 27, followed by 3% after that.
Yeah, the other factor that comes into play, it's not just the collections, it's also the disposal, because
Yep.
we pay waste management to dispose of all of this waste, and those costs have gone up a lot. And even the cost of recycling, we used to make money off a recycling program, but now it's a cost issue. It's an expense. It's not, there's no money coming into the system. It's only additional costs. And the costs have gone higher for recycling because they don't accept any contamination at all now. So any film plastic or other contaminants, they'll just reject the load, and it has to be disposed of like waste. So the recycling costs have gone up, the disposal rates have gone up. So that's also influenced the rate increases.
Okay, thank you. You know, these areas are all crucial. I mean, we can't live without them, so we just have to do what we have to do to maintain. So, I think that was it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. So it includes recycling.
It does, yeah.
And with that, and that's a great explanation, Director Jarrell, as far as the cost increasing for recycling. Do we have a good do we have a good participation from commercial businesses on recycling? Is that something that we should, you have a truck, it'd be nice if they could pick up from, 10 businesses on a street instead of 2 if they're on the street. You know what I mean?
So all commercial solid waste is private. The city doesn't provide any either recycling or refuse collection for the businesses. So that's an optional program for them.
Right.
It's like I said, it's no longer a lucrative program.
Okay.
There's no longer money that comes back. It's just an expense. So it's their decision. We don't mandate that they recycle.
Okay. And if I understand this, Director Dickinson, the fees increase is not yet in the fee schedule? Under refuse, at least?
Correct.
Okay.
Within the fee schedule, within the resolution, we have not yet updated it for the refuse and the water
Yeah.
shed rates. I don't believe water and sewer rates are in the resolution, but nothing's been updated.
Yeah, where are those? Where do we reflect the?
So I'll check on that to be sure, but I think the water and sewer usage rates are not included in the fee schedule. They
Right.
were set at a certain amount of time, and the code allows you to increase them up to 5%, without coming to the council, and I think we follow that. Is that true? Are the water and sewer rates in the fee schedule? I don't think they,
I
I
can't
don't think,
find them.
I think they
Yeah.
are. However, on the watershed and the refuse,
Yeah.
we did not update the fee schedule in time.
Right,
So it's coming as an amendment to you.
okay, in orange, maybe a new color, right? Ah. That's all I have. But as you did it for Storm, the comps, is there a way you can do that for, the same list where we're in the middle there? I don't know, are we in the middle for water and?
We can add that to this presentation and make sure to resend it out for the water and sewer fund.
Right, that would be helpful. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Anything you'd like to add? So nice working with us, or?
It was great working with you. Thank you so
well.
much. Yes, and we were very glad to be here today in person with you.
Okay. Where did you have to drive from? Where did you?
Pennsylvania?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not too bad. From the Westchester area, it's just
Yeah.
about a 2-hour drive.
Okay, okay.
And it was a beautiful day.
Yeah. Where are you parked?
Actually, on the street, we
Oh.
did the app, the parking app. It was really
you had
easy and
me.
great.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
We're so bad. We're so bad. Oh, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Alrighty. We
Madam
have,
Chair, I was looking in the code to see that we are required by code to keep a certain percentage in our enterprise funds. Are we not, Ms. Dickinson?
There was code language that talked about a certain percent, I believe, and I think that was recently changed by some language that we had in an ordinance regarding taking that specific language out as far as a minimum balance. And the reason that I was fine with that is because I know these studies are assuming 6 months balance, and that minimum balance was small compared to what we would really keep in there. Those are numbers and goals that I would like to set by policy and not in the code. I think it was like 5% or something like that. It's
Yeah.
very small. You'd want to keep more than that in any of your funds.
So instead of, we're using the 6 month.
6 months for this.
Okay.
Some of our internal service funds are a little lower. We're required to keep a certain percent in the health insurance fund as well. And then we have to cap it, so.
Okay, and that's across the board for all of our enterprise funds?
What is across the board?
The minimum.
So I don't believe we have a policy for transportation and parking. Those are both enterprise funds as well. But for the 4 that they spoke to, yes, 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Next, we have legislation, I believe. And we have hard copies of
I think we have 2 essays.
2 essays.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we give a favorable to essay 2723. It's a state grant that gives us 28.6. The Other Side of the Curb Photography and Writing Program.
I'll
No
second
match
it.
is required.
Oh, considering I already signed it.
Well, I was asking Ms. Johnson, I said, are we not supposed to notice that all the signatures were made by the same person? And she said they're all electronic,
Yeah.
so that's why they all look the
Yeah, you
same.
pick a font.
Yeah,
Yes, we
everybody
are.
picked the
They're
same font.
slightly
Well, no, Ms.
diff-
Dickinson
they're
chose a different font.
Yeah, they're slightly.
Everybody else's signature looks exactly the same.
DocuSign. It's kind of fun picking a
I
font.
have to be a rebel, you know that.
It's all good.
So I second her motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Alrighty, and then we have essay 28.
Madam Chair, I'll make a recommendation that we give a favorable recommendation to SA 28, which is another deposit that comes in to the fire department for CPR, first aid, and AED training.
I'll second it.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's all good. It's first aid training. Can't refuse that. Do we have a lot more of those coming before we close out the year? Just ask, no
I think
problem.
we do have one coming for, I'm gonna say, is it CNI? We're gonna do some improvements that HAC is gonna give us their grant money for the CNI project. And we're gonna come to you with that soon, but we have to process a MOU with HACA.
Wow, that's a
They're
big
gonna-
deal.
We're gonna be like a sub-recipient for the improvements.
Okay, so before we adjourn, I'd just like to review tomorrow, colleagues.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from the
Oh, okay.
April 24th meeting.
That was yesterday, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, tomorrow we have, tomorrow morning, we have human resource, and then we have a break, and then we have the city manager's office. We left a block for after, if we choose to have, I see here, presentation overflow, 12:15 to 1:15. I don't think
I thought we had debt affordability first.
that's the work session.
No, right here it says 9:30 to 10:30 debt affordability.
No, that's part of the, I don't know, if we-
Changed it.
I guess so from what you had.
Okay.
So we have HR first, and then the city manager, and then
Then nothing unless,
presentation overflow.
yeah.
Might we want to invite our colleagues to ask if they have questions for particular directors and give ourselves a window?
That's what it's for. You mean have the colleagues attend or ask them if they don't have much
Oh, I don't know how we
notice?
could format it. We
Yeah.
need to talk about that. Who would be needed to answer questions or?
Alderman O'Neill, any thoughts? Thursday morning, we don't have anything. We're going right to the work session, just FYI. And that's the CIP, debt affordability, and other budget-related items, so.
Madam Chair, I will not be here for that meeting. I will
Right.
be
Right.
in Wisconsin, so, and the
Yeah.
timing coordinates with my appointment there, so.
Yeah, let me know if you have any, well, you asked some questions today, but let me know if you have any other questions on the capital budget. We didn't give any department any heads up that we would be calling them back. So,
Did Alderman Gay have specific people who want to call back?
yeah, do you have Alderman Gay? It's, we are receptive to you. If you have anyone you want to call back after lunch tomorrow, or is it after lunch? Or what do you want to do there? Do you want to take a lunch and then talk to me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was,
This third segment, that is overflow, is after lunch. Is that okay?
yeah, that's fine if we need to break for lunch. Alderman Gay, did you want to have an opportunity to ask some questions during that time?
Tomorrow. 12:15 to 1:15. Are there specific?
Do you want me to ask, or Caitlin to ask Captain McGuiz to come back with the police department? All right, we'll do that. Do you think, is that the only one? Or do you think that will take up the whole hour? It sounds like it will from the questions that you.
I think that's fine.
All right,
Well, I think we should give Alderwoman Pendle Charles and anyone else who may have some questions to have that opportunity during that block also.
yeah. 'Cause you've been
Thank
here
you
through all
so
of
much,
this.
Finance Committee. I can't think of anyone else. You said the police were coming, and who else again?
Well, they're coming in because Dwan has questions.
Right, and that's fine. I don't think I have any questions for them.
You had some questions about somebody else, and we ran out of time.
I think she was going to go offline.
It was
with
MIT,
Okay,
but I don't think I need them to come back.
okay.
Okay. All right, last call. Director Dickinson?
What are you doing on Thursday morning?
Nothing.
Okay, so is it
Sleeping in.
canceled, or are you going to start deliberating on your report?
We're taking it off and just assuming the 3 o'clock
Okay.
meeting is our meeting.
All right, thank you.
She's right. Alderman Finlayson is right. Kaylin, could
Of course, I
you
won't be, but
verify if, is it Captain McGrath? They're both captains. Yeah, Captain McGrath can speak to the budget tomorrow.
or the chief. I thought
Well,
some of
whoever
the
can speak
questions
to
I
the
heard.
budget, is it, I think it sounds like it's operational budget questions, so. All right,
I thought I heard questions from Alderman Gay about the program.
right, philosophy, so it could be, if the chief can make it, but we'll have it regardless. All righty. Okay, anything else? Thank you so
All right,
much. That was
good
really
job.
informative.
I think that was one of the most informatives for me on the enterprise funds. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot, and it makes sense.
Are we finished?
At this time, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.